Hey gang, what's going on? So, week 4 is in the books, and for college football, and we are moving on to week 5. We are almost halfway through the season, so let's get into it. But before we do so, if you like this kind of content, any college football content whatsoever, hit that like, subscribe, and bell icon buttons. It's greatly appreciated. Extremely helpful for the channel, as well as it gives me great feedback on what you think of the content that I put out. And I don't want you to miss out on a single thing that I put out for any college football news. So let's get into it. So let's start off with the Georgia game. So number 1 Georgia went up against UAB, and the Bulldogs were hosting the Blazers of UAB. And they ran away with that game, rightfully so, as I expected them to. So Georgia wins 49-21, and Georgia remains undefeated and is 4-0 and improves their home record to 4-0, which is a big deal because that's where they play their best football, I think. I think they're better at home, as is every team, but especially them with that environment. So good job on Georgia's part to remain undefeated at home as well as during the regular season, while UAB falls to 1-3 and 0-2 on the road. Moving on to the next game, which is Michigan and Rutgers. So number 2 Michigan was hosting an unranked Rutgers team, and the Wolverines improved to 4-0 on the season with a 31-7 blowout of Rutgers, while the Scarlet Knights dropped to 3-1 on the season and 1-1 in the Big Ten. The Wolverines improved to 4-0, remain undefeated, and get to 1-0 on against the Big Ten. So good job for Michigan on a 31-7 rout, taking care of business in Ann Arbor. Then we have number 3 Texas versus the Bears of Baylor in Baylor's home stadium, in which Texas routed Baylor at Waco, or in Waco, I should say. And the final of that game was 38-6. So Texas remains undefeated as well. They are now 4-0 and 1-0 versus the Big 12, while Baylor drops to 1-3 in the season and 0-1 against Big 12 teams. Moving on to the next game, I personally thought this was going to be more of a blowout, but number 4 Florida State faced off against unranked Clemson. This game went into overtime, and Florida State walks out with a win, winning 31-24 over the Tigers in Death Valley. So the Florida State Seminoles improved to 4-0, their best start in quite some time, and are 2-0 against the ACC, while the Clemson Tigers dropped to 2-2 and 0-2 versus the ACC. And if we remember, in week 1, Clemson, when they were ranked, dropped their opener to the Duke Blue Devils at Duke. So Clemson is showing that they are regressing and that they are falling off, even though they played Florida State quite well. Florida State still walked out with the win, and they also ended their losing streak against Clemson. So that's a big deal in itself. Moving on to the next game. Number 5 USC played the Sun Devils of Arizona State, and they played at Arizona State and won that game 42-28, as they were all expected to do. As everyone was expecting them to do, They improved to 4-0 on the season, while improving to 2-0 against the Pac-12, while Arizona State goes 1-3 or falls to 1-3, and 0-1 against Pac-12 teams. Next game was close. I thought it was going to be a little bit more of a one-sided contest, but in the number 6 Ohio State Buckeyes game versus the number 9 Notre Dame Fighting Irish, Ohio State at Notre Dame pulls out a 17-14 win, while Ohio State improves to 4-0 on the season and 2-0 on the road. Notre Dame falls to 4-1 on the season and drops to 2-1 at home. So Ohio State takes that game 17-14. In the next game, we have number 24 Iowa, who I don't think was as strong as number 7 Penn State. And I figured that was probably going to be a blowout, which it was. While Iowa visited Penn State at Penn State, Penn State wins. Penn State wins 31-0. So Iowa drops to 3-1 on the season, while going 0-1 against the Big Ten. And Penn State improves to 4-0 and 2-0 on the Big Ten against Big Ten teams. California versus number 8 Washington at number 8 Washington. Well, that was another blowout. The Huskies took care of business by beating the Golden Bears 59-32 at home. California drops to 2-2 on the season and 0-1 against Pac-12 teams, while Washington improves to 4-0 and 1-0 against Pac-12 teams. Going into a very much and highly anticipated game between number 19 Colorado and number 10 Oregon at the Ducks' home turf. The Oregon Ducks took care of business in a game which I thought was going to be much closer than it ended up being. Colorado ended up getting blown out 42-6, which dropped them to 3-1 and 0-1 against Pac-12 teams, while Oregon continues to roll and improves to 4-0 and 1-0 against Pac-12 teams. The Ducks beat the Buffaloes 42-6. Moving on to the next game, number 22 UCLA versus number 11 Utah. Utah at home wins that game 14-7. Very close game. UCLA drops to 3-1 on the season, while dropping to 0-1 against the Pac-12, while Utah is 4-0 on the season and 1-0 against Pac-12 teams. Moving on to the next game, which is number 12 LSU hosting the unranked Arkansas Razorbacks, in which this was much closer than I thought it would be. I thought LSU would handle business the way they should have. They did. They did get the win, but it wasn't as what I expected. Like I said, Arkansas loses by a field goal, 34-31. So in a 34-31 win for LSU, they improved to 3-1 on the season and 2-0 against the SEC, while Arkansas drops to 2-2 on the season and 0-1 against SEC teams. Then we had number 13 Alabama playing the Rebels of number 15 Ole Miss in Tuscaloosa, which Alabama won 24-10. So Ole Miss drops to 3-1 on the season, while going 0-1 against SEC teams, and Alabama goes to 3-1 while being 1-0 against SEC teams. Then we've got number 14 Oregon State, who against number 21 Washington State. This was an upset. I had Oregon State winning this game, but Oregon State loses 38-35 at Washington State, where the Cougars improved to 4-0 on the season while being 1-0 against Pac-12 teams. Oregon State drops to 3-1 on the year and 0-1 against Pac-12 teams. Oklahoma, number 16 Oklahoma, played unranked Cincinnati at Cincinnati in which they handled business like they should. They won 20-6. I thought it was going to be more of a blowout, but they still took care of business. They moved to 4-0 on the season while being 1-0 against Big 12 teams. While Cincinnati drops to 2-2 and is 0-1 against Big 12 teams. Then we've got North Carolina, number 17, going up against Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh, and the Tar Heels took care of business. They ran right through the Panthers, 41-24. So the Panthers go to 1-3 on the season, while being 0-1 against ACC teams. And North Carolina improves to 4-0 while being 1-0 against ACC teams. Duke was at UConn. Number 18 Duke was at UConn and handled business big time by running through the Huskies 41-7. So the Blue Devils improved to 4-0 and 1-0 on the road, while UConn drops to 0-4 and 0-3 at home. Miami went to Temple, visited them, took care of business. The number 20 Hurricanes won this game outright 41-7. The Owls of Temple dropped to 2-2 on the season while dropping to 2-1 at home, while Miami improves to 4-0 on the season and 1-0 on the road. Then we have the UTSA, University of Texas San Antonio Roadrunners, visiting the number 23 Tennessee Volunteers, where Tennessee handled business 45-14. So UTSA drops to 1-3 on the season and 0-2 on the road, while Tennessee is 3-1 on the season and 2-0 at home. And finally, to round out the week, we had Charlotte visiting number 25 Florida, in which Florida won at home 22-7, dropping Charlotte to 1-3 on the season and 0-2 on the road, while Florida went to 3-1 on the season and 3-0 at home. Let me know what you guys think of these games, and let's get into it. Which games were the most surprising? Which games did you think were going to be blowouts that weren't? Which games did you think were going to be closer that weren't? So let's get into this. Until next time, have a great rest of your night, and I'll talk to you next time.